Is Doug Holder. I'm the host of Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer. And my guest this afternoon is Donna Johnson. Welcome, Donna. Glad you can be here. I'll give you a brief, background about Donna. Donna Johnson is a daughter of the South. She was raised in Tennessee and spent summers visiting extended family in Texas. Miss Johnson's poetry seeks to explore themes of loss, betrayal, and redemption. And she's a self-proclaimed poetry Greek. She asked for the Norton Anthology of Poetry for Christmas as a teenager. Is that true?
That's true.
Oh my God. Miss Johnson began trying to write poetry earnestly in her early 30s, not the early 30s.
Not the early.
Not that old. No. Her new collection, she's been published in a lot of really fine magazines, including Ibbotson Street, which I founded, right? But Green Mountains Review and Blue Unicorn and Birmingham Poetry Review and Two Rivers Review. 2010, she won the Cut Bank magazine's annual poetry contest and was a finalist for the Patricia Dobler Award. And she's got undergraduate degrees from the University of Georgia and has an MA in psychology. And she is, I said she's a founding member of the Concord Poetry Center. Anyway, accomplished woman. I was going to ask you, because I looked up, I'm not afraid to admit, I didn't, I was thinking, typo, I mean salvage, and I didn't know what salvage was, so I said it's the end of like the fabric, that keeps things together. And it's kind of like salvage in a way, because it salvages the piece. So I'm going to say, what is, what do you feel keeps your poetry together, or you together, or, this thematic thing?
I think, many people write not as therapy, but as a way to understand the world, and then have some maybe second thought that their understanding, if they can write it decently enough, will be someone else's shared understanding. So I think that a lot of the exercise of writing for me was trying to pull together memories, things that I had seen, voices, accents, idiosyncrasies, stories, and try to see if it made a whole. And so that, along with the fact that selvage in particular, when I was a little girl, my mom used to make most of my clothing. She was a really good seamstress. And so I spent a lot of times in fabric stores, looking through pattern books and bolts of fabric, and also trying, which turned out to be usually disastrous, sewing projects. But then you start. So I have these sewing terms, and
you don't have any like quilts and all this stuff.
No, I mean I made one of the most ugly. It was called a watercolor quilt ever, with a friend of mine, and anyway, I didn't inherit that.
No, I didn't get that gene.
That fabric design gene, but I remember seeing that on the similar to galleys of a book, on the edge of printed fabric, they have little dots for each color that they use to print the fabric. So if it's got blues and greens, they'll have these different shades. And I thought that was fascinating, and so one of my poems, I used that trope, and that became the title.
Right. You write of themes, it says, of loss, betrayal, and redemption. Are you optimistic in your outlook? I mean, do you believe that most of us will find some sort of redemption in life?
If you read my poems, you'd probably answer no.
I read some of them. Yeah.
But actually I am, and I just don't think I don't think we can know what that means, or even what we think is a negative experience can, now I'm sounding like a Hallmark card, can,
What doesn't kill you makes you strong.
Yeah, so, but generally I'd say I am positive. I'm positive about people and
You believe
dogs.
in the kindness of strangers? Yeah, no, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've been the beneficiary of many kindnesses. Fortunately, many more kindnesses than not. So,
So then why is your
lucky.
poetry reflective of a more darker view?
I think that I don't know that I can sum that up
Easily.
neatly, but I've always been attracted to poems. So before I ever thought of writing a poem, I remember reading old like ballads, and I always liked the ballads that were sad and slightly creepy, or the bittersweet poems rather than the exuberant anthem
So
type
like
poems.
Dexter Gordon's Round Midnight has a beauty to it, right. So
love
that's
that.
in a kind of way you like
Yeah.
that sort of dark and moody. Yeah.
I used to have a tape of it.
Well, just go on Spotify and you can get all the Dexter Gordon stuff and put it in. Yeah. Now,
Wonderful.
I always tell my students about an introduction to creative writing at Endicott College, where your daughter goes. I always tell my students about the importance of detail. And I was reading your poem, "In Brief Occasion of My Father's Happiness," and you were talking about the pumps hidden in the box, powdered donuts. There's sort of a lull. You established sort of like this lull before a storm. How does that process come about? How do you? What were you thinking?
Well, I'm trying to think of where that even started. I mean, there's one hand, I've got that strong now I'm stereotyping, Southern storyteller urge, which is to have some kind of narrative, for the most part, in there. It's something I've actually thought about and tried to work against a little bit, but so I was thinking.
Why would you work against it?
Well, I remember being at a workshop and having the teacher say narrative poetry is dead. I mean, some
people say poetry is dead.
Yeah,
You can't listen to it. Yeah.
But I do think that like with form and with other things, I think there's a sense of the modernist urge to break the story a little bit, to tweak, not have the.
I mean, your poetry is accessible. Do people find anything wrong with accessibility? Or?
I think that.
But it's layered and it's nuanced, but it's still accessible.
I think that I am not. I'm going to sound silly. I'm not smart enough to write anything too inaccessible. But actually, I do. I read an essay by Mary Carr, another Southerner, about. It's the opposite of defense in something against obfuscation, and it's not against subtlety or against metaphor or against imagery or against heightened language, but she talks about don't obfuscate for to just confuse the hell out of people,
Right.
And maybe there's a little bit of that in me, but I also, it's just more that I think in stories. So I constantly find myself needing to have some kind of narrative thread for the most part.
I think that's, I like that sort of, and obviously your book Selvage is published by Carnegie Mellon, which up with You Pitt series and all that is one of the best series out there, right?
Well, thank you.
So
Yeah,
it can't be chopped liver.
Well, I was, I was actually working for a while for an organization called Winning Writers, and there's a woman.
I remember that. Yeah, there's a contest.
Yeah,
you guys used to send stuff to me.
Yeah, she is.
I'm a losing writer, but.
Well, when you count up.
Right.
I can give you a high five on that one.
Yeah.
Well,
you made
Writers
it.
team.
Yeah.
Well, but the woman who started that website, Jendi Writer, is out of Northampton. But I worked for her for a while, just kind of doing some editing and odd jobs for her on the website. And I learned a lot about contests, and I found out about this open reading period through that winning writers, because they don't, it's on the website. You know, if you go to their university press, they mention that they do have an open reading period the month of October, and that they consider both published and non-published writers in that, and it's open. But that's how I found out about it. I did submit to a lot of other more traditional contests too. I mean, you try to find out. I mean, that's one of the challenges, I think, of being a poet, is like out of magazines, like where do you send, you know, if you're trying to publish poetry, where do you send to?
Where'd you find our magazine? How'd you find out about it?
Kim
Trident.
Oh,
she's a friend of yours too?
She's a friend of mine.
Who just had great success recently.
Yeah.
Right? She's been on the show. She's got, how many, like 3 books out or something?
Yes, she has Plum, which was accepted, I want to say Main
Street Rec?
Yeah,
she's had another book with them, yes.
Yeah, which was her chap Bathing in Her Sleep. And so I met her through a workshop in Concord, through the Concord Poetry Center, and she's wonderful. And she did the Poets for Haiti anthology.
Yes, I had her on that for that. And she was editor for Ibbotson for a number of issues, yeah. So, great. So, there was another one, I forget the title, it was dealt with a photograph of your father. Right, and when he was very young, and you could see you could see the sort of the sadness in his eyes, and that sort of, you could see like the man he's going to grow up to. And I was going to also ask you about photographs. Photographs, I find, are good things to focus on.
They really are. I mean, you know, pieces of art, you know, that are, I'm not going to say it right, the Greek word, aphrasier, ekphrasia or something, where you're inspired by a work of art, or, you know, it could be a photograph or painting. I also tried to write this poem about Michelangelo's sketches of part of what ended up in the Sistine Chapel, these 3 different versions of Eve. But my father's, that was a photograph, and that I have of my dad, who's the youngest of 4, and it was a bit of an attempt to think about what his childhood was, or an aspect of his childhood, and extrapolate from a few stories that I had. But
so I was going to ask you now to read from your work, whatever you want from your book, Selvage. Delayed here.
Wait a minute.
There you go, Selvage.
Oh, all right.
And it can be bought on Amazon, I imagine, and can it be bought on your website?
It cannot be bought on my website, but I have a link to...
What is your website?
My website is djohnsonpoet.com.
djohnsonpoet.com?
Yes, and also this Carnegie Mellon, like a bunch of university presses, distributes through University Press of New England.
Right.
And so it's also on that website. And I it's funny because, I guess I can say this because everybody can realize it who uses the internet. The books are always cheaper on Amazon than they are on the publisher, and I don't know if the publisher gets like less, or I don't know. Anyway.
It's not great for the publisher, Amazon.
Yeah,
they take
probably.
A big cut.
I think they do.
Yeah. So, Brian, is it in the bookstores a lot? Square?
No, not in any. I just am. I'm going to be at AWP in Boston.
So am I. Are you on a panel?
I'm not on a panel. Are you?
Yep.
What day?
Look at the book on Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look at because I'm going to be there Friday and Saturday.
Oh, okay.
And I'll look for you because I'm going to actually, Joan Houlihan, who we mentioned, is on a panel Friday.
Oh.
And then Saturday morning, Carnegie Mellon's like the book fair.
Oh, you're going to read?
I'm not going to read. They just set up a table for their authors to do signings. I mean, maybe some of the other people that are more well known, like David Yetzi and.
Well, it's a good photo op anyway.
Yeah.
Bring your camera. Yeah. Anyway, that's at the Sheridan Hotel starting a week from this weekend, right? Right. Yeah. Okay. So, read some poems. Yeah.
So one of the things that I really find fascinating, and I've loved since I was a kid, are persona poems, where you try to take on a character that's either well known or made up or some combination. And so. This is So I have a number of these in here, and this is actually my one quasi-prose poem, and it's called Eve Gets a Makeover.
As in Adam and Eve?
Yeah, and the narrator, the persona is the serpent, is talking to Eve.
Oh.
I don't like to say anybody's hopeless, but that yellow dotted Swiss you just bought, you know, the one with a full skirt and gathered waist, makes you look wider than you are tall. Enough material in it to patch the Hindenburg. Don't fret though, hun, you got your charms, just got to make a little use of them before they're gone. A little contour cheek powder, a shade darker than your natural, some highlights. What you waiting for? Plenty women getting all their stuff done. Who's going to throw stones? Your kids are clean, their hair is combed. You make cakes from scratch. Once a week you bring that broccoli casserole to the nursing home. I know what they told you. Jesus first, others second, yourself last spells joy. But joy ain't beauty. And I don't see you displaying much of the former anyhow, worrying about your husband working late, maybe finding someone younger. Anyway, the King James did get one thing right. All flesh is grass. That's why you best be ruthless with it. I can help you there. I know flesh and I know ruthless.
Mm.